Okay, so welcome to another edition of the Joe Dunnrite Show. Today we're going to talk briefly about reloading bullets. Been doing this for probably close to 43 years, and just decided that I was going to set up some bullets, some cartridges actually, is what they're really called, for my two adult boys who have drawn elk tags. And over the years, we've managed to gather up a lot of different calibers, but today we're going to talk about the Winchester 308. So the 308's been around for a long time. It's kind of a very similar round to the military 7.62. It's actually a very accurate cartridge, much more accurate than a 30-06. I know people will argue with me on that, but the nice thing about the 308 is it's a very short action round. There are a few rounds that have been spun off of the 308 that are actually very notable. The 243 is a spin-off of the 308 cartridge, as well as the 7mm 08, and there's probably other ones out there. 7mm 08 actually is a really great cartridge for a young, smaller person because it has less recoil. Not quite the same amount of knockdown power. Usually you load a 7mm 08 with a smaller bullet, maybe in the 140 to 150 range, where a 308 you could load up to as high as 220. I don't really recommend that high with the 308. So today we're going to talk about basically just some prep work. So I ordered some brand new brass from Winchester, brand new unprimed, brand new rifle brass. The brass was in pretty good shape, but what I want to talk about today is before you actually start reloading, what you need to do. So what I did is I took the brass out of the bag and I sorted through it. It all looked good, and then I went ahead and resized it. So what I use is a Rock Tucker combo, RCBS Rock Tucker combo. It's a real basic setup. It's been around for a long time. I've had this reloader actually since the mid to late 70s, and I've never had any issues with it. So what I did is I ran all the brass through the sizing die, primarily because the neck on these cartridges was a little dinged up. It was very easy to do. What I would recommend, though, is I use a case lubricant, and this bottle is probably, I kid you not, 20 plus years old, but it's the bottom line is it's a non-aerosol based lubricant. Primarily uses lanolin as the lubricant. Lanolin is what comes off of sheep's wool, and I will tell you a couple things. When you resize your cases, you want to lay out a towel. I stack about 10 cases, and I spray a couple sprays, and then I roll it, and basically I put the lubricant on my fingers. When you size a case, it's kind of like love. Love is like oxygen. You get too much, you get too high, not enough, you're going to die. So same deal with the lubricant. If you put too much lubricant on the case, what happens, a couple things can happen. First of all, if you're lucky to actually get the case through the die, and I can show you what the dies look like. This is a 308 die. You have two dies in the 308 setup. You have a sizing die, and then you have a which actually decaps the primer, and then you also have a die that sets the bullet length. But if you have too much lubricant on your case, and you're lucky enough to get it into the die, you'll crimp the case, you'll crush the case, you'll put a little dimple in there. Now I've shot them with that for like just practice rounds. I don't think I'd hunt with one, but you want to just make sure that there's enough lubricant that it coats the die, but they don't need to be dripping in that. If you don't get enough, sometimes I've actually had a case get stuck in the die. So you want to make sure you get enough, and as you pull the lever down for the die, if you find that it's not going through the resizing die smoothly and easily, just back off, drop it down, get another case and go through it. But basically I resized all the cases. And then after that, what you need to do, even though it's brand new, unprimed brass, you want to measure the case length on these. So The case length on a 308 is 2 inches, .015, so 2 inches and 0.15 thousandths. So you just measure and make sure you don't have any rejects. And then once you're clear on that, so let me just talk about that. Even when you reload and after, so a case like this, you might get 8 to 15 reloads depending on how lucky you are. And every time you resize the case, and 15 is pretty optimistic, I would say 8. Every time you resize the case grows longer. So you're extruding this case when you throw it through the die. So when you shoot it in a gun, the bullet expands to the chamber of the rifle. And different rifles are chambered differently, but once it expands and you extract it, it might not go into another gun, it might not even go back into the same gun you shot it. But by resizing it, you're stretching the case, so you need to trim it. We have a trim tool. I'll show you the trim tool later. I use an RCBS Trim Pro. It's manual, it's really easy. But you want to check the case length. If the case length is too long, the problem is the bullet will not actually go into the rifle. So I did a few rounds last year, and I didn't check the case length because I thought I was okay on some older shells, and they were too long and they wouldn't actually go into the gun. So anyway, just want to talk today a little bit about that. So after I get them all sized, make sure the trim's good, got them in this milk jug, and then I basically, and you might think I'm crazy, but I just use acetone. I pour acetone into the milk jug, and I know you're all going to say, well, acetone will eat that milk jug, but for the length of time that it's in there, maybe 2 or 3 minutes, it's no big deal. Shake it around, pour it down through a funnel back into the can, and it's good. And that just gets any of this lanolin off. And then I take these cases and I throw them into a tumbler. So I've got a Franklin Arsenal tumbler. It's probably the cheapest tumbler out there, but it's amazing. It does really, really well. And I tumble them with some media for maybe an hour, hour and a half, and that just kind of shines them up a little bit. Sometimes when you resize them, they will get some marks on them. So anyway, that's about it. Now what we're doing today is we're going to put the primers in. Let me talk a little bit about primers. So primers are picky. It's what makes the bullet go. And so when you do primers, you dump them into a container. Now this is a bowl I rescued out of the kitchen probably 25 years ago. Just get yourself one. Don't use one that the wife's going to come back and try to use it later, because this stuff is not really good. You don't really want to do that. But you don't want to touch primers. If you drop a primer on the ground, which I do once in a while, just leave it. They're not worth it. It's like $4 or $5 for 100. If you touch a primer and the oil gets on the primer, you might risk it not going off. And you don't want to miss a 360 bull elk or a record mule deer or whitetail deer because your greasy finger got on the primer. So just toss it. But what I do is I pour them in here, I put them inside the tube, and then basically all you really do is you just take the bullet, you put it into the die, you lift the die, you pull the handle back, and then basically you just pop it back, it drops the primer. Lift it up, push it in, and you got your primer seated. You just always want to check and make sure that you don't have any media from the polisher, but you just get a good clean seat. That's about it today. We'll talk a little bit more about gunpowder, and I do have some ideas. I mean, I read a lot of books about these guys that are worried about 42.1 grains and 42.2 grains and 42. Look, I do hunting rounds. I will tell you that I believe that the human error is way greater than 0.1 or 0.2. That doesn't mean I don't load my bullets perfect. I just don't go out to the range and shoot 1,000 rounds to figure out if 42.2 is better than 42.3. But we'll talk about that on another episode. Hope you enjoyed this. Hope you gleaned something. Please visit my site, The Joe Dunnrite Show. Thanks.